Hello and welcome to the OSU Preview Podcast. I'm Alex Dusky and I'm joined by Asa Lucas and Jace Andrews in the podcast booth. Guys, how are you doing today?
Homecoming weekend. It is an exciting time here in Stillwater.
Very exciting. Everything is starting to get up. I even saw Pistol Pete dancing on the streets today.
Yes, he was out in the corners by the Pike House with the pumping and all-night pump. Festivities are still going strong, I guess.
Make sure to watch out for the lightsaber guy. He comes every walk around, or he was there yesterday, so just look for things on Instagram and on TikTok for a lightsaber guy. It's a weird tradition we're starting to have at Oklahoma State.
Is it you, Asa?
No.
Or are you the lightsaber guy?
Well, if you want to, can I put in my social media handles for my lightsaber account?
All right. Well, before we can talk about the homecoming game, unfortunately, we do have to talk about OSU's loss on the road last week to TCU in double overtime. The Cowboys lost to the Horned Frogs 43-40. None of our predictions were correct, unfortunately, as we all had the Cowboys winning, so no one gets bragging rights there. I will admit I was not able to watch the entire game as I was back up in NDSU supporting the Bison, who also lost offensive momentum towards the end of the game, and I think that's a good segue into what happened in the second half of this OSU offense.
It is called Spencer Sanders syndrome.
Okay,
that's
care to explain?
It's called Casey Dunn syndrome, actually, is the better way here.
We're pointing fingers over here.
Before we get into that, though, I'm going to start this positively. We looked amazing with about 10 minutes to go in the second quarter. Oh. We were doing everything perfect. Spencer had 2 rushing touchdowns. Everything was going exactly as planned. It was 24-3. We were putting it to them. The only reason TCU had any points is because they had a long, methodical drive that Max Duggan ended up punching in a touchdown. And they
also made a field goal as time expired. So at half, it was 24-13.
Well, yeah, but it was 24-7 with 10 minutes to go in the second quarter, is
Correct.
what I'm saying. That's where everything broke down. And that's where, really, to me, the play calling became playing to not lose instead of playing to win.
And you're talking about being fair. I think against almost any other team in the Big 12, if you have that kind of lead, nobody's going to be able to come back.
I will say
even
that.
With the conservative play calling that OSU normally does. However, we're playing a Max Duggan TCU Horned Frogs team that people are already saying they're going to go undefeated in the Big 12.
We also made trips down to the red zone, but we just couldn't score. We had 3 touchdowns in the first half and then never again. It was just field goals until the first overtime?
Yes. We scored a 52-yard field goal in second overtime. This game baffles me in a lot of ways just because everything had to go wrong for us to lose that game in the second half, and it did. And that's kind of the unfortunate part. I'm not trying to put the blame on anybody. Like that's not what I'm trying to do.
I think you did name names.
I did.
Put the blame.
I will not take that back. But the way this team played, it was just so unfortunate because, I got to be honest. I was sitting at home. I was watching the game. It was 24-7, and I was thinking, we look amazing.
Mm-hmm. I was in the Fargo Dome. I'd get the ESPN alerts because I didn't have good service, but I'd get the touchdown. I'm like, oh my gosh, OSU's doing it. We're going to be fine.
That's how I know both of you didn't grow up watching Oklahoma State football is because you saw a 24-7 lead, and you're like, oh, man, here we are.
I never thought for once we were going to, I never was like, okay, we're going to win. We're going to win. I was never like that. I will say that. I know enough about Oklahoma State to know that a lead is never safe, especially with the play calling situations.
I
knew that immediately.
I want to address the elephant in the room. Is Spencer Sanders healthy? He was finished 16 of 36. Was that due to receivers not being open, poor throws, PI calls, or what?
I think part of what did happen was I think Spencer Sanders, we don't know a lot about it. Mike Gundy hasn't released any statements, but I think Spencer Sanders is playing hurt. I think his throwing arm, he was not playing to his highest level.
Do you think we should continue to play him hurt for these 3 weeks and just risk a loss and put Gunner in to get Spencer healthy, or continue to, bring him down, make it to the Big 12 championship, and play Gunner?
I'd say against Texas, this is a game where Spencer Sanders needs to play, but the other games when we're talking K-State or Oklahoma or Iowa State or West Virginia, I think we can get away with having Gunner in. But this is kind of a do-or-die game, and Oklahoma State is an emotional team. If we get on a losing streak here, then I'm starting to get really concerned for what can happen.
I want some insider information that I may or may not have. I will not name names as to who gave me this information. Spencer Sanders is completely healthy, from what I have heard.
So then why did he have less than a 50%?
Because people like to make
Pass
rumors,
completion.
and the sports animal loves to talk Spencer Sanders and that he's hurt. He had his best day of
that doesn't
practice
answer my
yesterday.
question. Why would he finish less than 50% pass completion?
think-
Oh,
You-
he
you
was
don't-
hurt last
Okay.
week.
Okay.
I can agree
So
with
you're
that.
saying he's
Okay.
bounced back
Correct.
now.
I think
Okay.
no.
Okay.
Here's what I'm saying. He was definitely hurt last week, and no one wanted to say anything. But this week, he is fine. He's been practicing perfectly. And from my knowledge, I've heard that Wednesday was his best day of practice, not of the week, not of the month, of the year, maybe of his career. So I should
Before-
expect the best Spencer Sanders this weekend.
Let's finish talking about TCU, and then we can dive more into this Texas game. Any general thoughts on defense? We only got 1 sack and 3 tackles for loss. 2 of those tackles for loss were by Taylor Lacey, who also got the 1 sack, so it's kind of the Tyler Lacey show.
I mean, we know our defense is not as strong as it was last year. A couple weeks ago, we were comparing stats back and forth about the difference between this defense this year and then last year. This game just showed everyone once again what Oklahoma State's problem is. If Spencer Sanders does not play to the best of his ability and he doesn't have a lights-out game, our defense is not good enough to cover for that, and we will lose.
Right.
I will say with the defense, Mason Cobb having 16 tackles is pretty cool.
Okay,
But also, one guy to mention, Sean Michael Flanagan had 11 tackles. I mean, we haven't talked about him that much all year, but he came out and played, and I felt like I saw him a lot on the field at TCU.
That's a good segue into my positive takeaways. I do want to mention Mason Cobb. He had 16 tackles, which is a new career high for him, and it's also the most tackles in a single game by a Cowboy since Jordan Stearns. He had 19 in December of 2016.
Wow.
Some other cool, fun takeaways from this game. Spencer Sanders did set the new quarterback rushing records. He now has 1,874 total yards. He has now passed Brent Blackman by 4. Spencer is now also second all-time in program history for total offensive yards, third on the all-time passing list, and third on career pass attempts. So he's still having a record-breaking season.
Sure, but I'll take wins over record-breaking any day.
And we kind of talked about the 52-yard field goal. We have to give a shout-out to the special teams, Tanner Brown.
T. Brown.
He was the Big 12 Special Teams Player of the Week again. On the season, he is 12 for 12 on field goal attempts. He is the first kicker in program history to make 8 field goals in a 2-game stretch. And then,
yikes.
like you mentioned, Jace, he had the career-high 52-yarder in overtime.
Yeah, I mean, he played pretty well, and that was the one positive that Coach Gundy did say in his press conferences this week and after the game. He said, listen, we got a great kicker. I mean, he went out there. I believed in him. I'm going to say it. That field goal was probably good from 60. It was a nail. That was a nail.
It's as I talk about on my broadcast when doing my high school play-by-play, there's been a couple games where it's like, oh, and our player of the game is the punter or the kicker, and that's never a good thing, is when your coach is kind of praising your kicker unless it's an overtime kick.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Obviously, it's great to have 8 field goals made in a 2-game stretch, but is it great to attempt 8 field goals in a 2-game stretch?
I will say one more thing before we move on from TCU. I don't know. I know, Alex, you didn't get to watch much of the game, and I don't know if you turned it off after the end, Asa. When the fans rushed the field, they cut to a shot of Spencer Sanders. Do you have any idea what was happening when the shot was on
It
him?
was the 2 offensive linemen who came, big men, to protect Spencer.
Hunter Woodard and Taylor Materko both escorted Spencer Sanders out of that field so that he could not get hurt. And I think that right there, Steve Sarkisian was the one who pointed it out. That shows how much trust they have in Spencer Sanders. And as much as people want to say, oh, it was Spencer's fault we lost this game. Oh, he couldn't get the offensive going.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Well, I just feel like this team is around him. I know that.
He is the leader of this team.
Yes.
There is no doubt, and you can see it if there's any plays where there's a late hit on the quarterback. The offensive linemen are right there, and they will shove the defensive lineman back or whoever.
No.
Something that is kind of important to note is that defensive tackle Brennan Evers is foregoing the rest of the season to prepare for the NFL draft, which I didn't think was a hot take or anything, but people took to Twitter. Brennan has been injured most of his career. He's injured currently. And some people are like, well, he didn't do anything anyway. Well, because he's been injured since the first game of the year.
He had a good year last year.
Correct. And so I think it's a big... We're not feeling his presence now, but I think if he would be healthy and he chose to forgo. It's a big hit for Cowboy football, and I wish him the best in the draft.
I wish him
I doubt he'll get drafted.
Yeah, I wish him the best. I think he may get undrafted free agent signing, but no disrespect to him, but this defensive line is deep. I think maybe later in the season, if we start seeing injuries, we definitely will feel it. But currently, I love the formation that we have with Trace Ford, Tyler Lacey, and Brock. I mean, that is a deadly combination right there.
You have to remember that Trace and Brock have been injured for a year and a half now, and so
Correct,
that's why
they've both been playing right now.
Correct, but I'm saying Brennan was the name that we heard
last year. Yes,
before.
Yes.
Any other takeaways from the TCU game before we move on?
Just got to shake it off. We got to focus on Texas because they are coming in for blood.
Oklahoma State always has one of these games. Me and Ace have talked about this. I think the one thing to take away, this time it took 2 overtimes for that game to be a loss.
Correct.
Most of the time, it's all right, we're done in the second half. This time we had built up a good enough lead and had kind of staved off a lot that it took that long.
Looking at the Big 12, I am in a rut with our predictions. I was 1 of 2 last week alongside Jace. Asa, hats off to you. You were 2-1.
Thank you.
Obviously, the Cowboys were a loss for all of us, and the Jayhawks let us down. So Asa and Jace, if you will, are leading 9-9 of their predictions. So you're 50%, and I am 7-11, like the gas station coming out of town.
Womp, womp, womp.
Yeah, we need some sound effects. Looking at the Big 12 last week, down go the Jayhawks. OSU won 52-42, and it was a shootout. But was it due to Jason Bean not living up to Jalen Daniels' performance, or is just OU too angry to lose again?
And give credit to Dylan Gabriel. I mean, when he's there, Oklahoma State can score.
Oklahoma
can score. He's a pretty proficient quarterback.
I'll say this. Jason Bean was very good when he came in relief of Daniels.
And against the TCU game?
It's a way different animal when you are expecting to play. You are getting those first-team reps.
In
you
Norman.
have the pressure, and you have to travel to Norman.
Correct.
To an angry fan base. I mean, they're angry.
Yep.
And if you would have told me last year that OU would have only beaten Kansas by 10 at home, I wouldn't have believed you.
Even though last year they almost were upset on the road.
Well,
I remember we were doing a different show. We were doing another pregame show together.
Correct.
And then we were
But
watching
still.
But yeah, it's weird to think in Norman, they only won by 10. It is weird to say that against Kansas.
The fact that Kansas and Oklahoma was a big game is the more interesting thing to me.
Baylor lost on the road to West Virginia. Last week we pre-filmed the podcast and we all predicted that Baylor would win. And I was shocked. I was working at the radio station and decided, let's check ESPN. And I see Baylor loses.
Poor Baylor. What is happening with Baylor and Waco?
I don't know. I'm done not picking West Virginia when they are in West Virginia.
In Morgantown?
They do so well there. It's not even funny. I mean, that's such a hard stadium to play. I'll say it. West Virginia and Iowa State, they're hard to go to. I mean, that's a long drive.
You've
it's a
been
long
there.
flight. I mean, those are hard places to play.
What is Morgantown like?
The Morgantown faithful are as rowdy and loyal as any other fan base or any other college football fan base in America. The altitude does make a slight difference, and the air is different in Morgantown. I will admit being there. But at the same time, these fans are kind of used to this football program not being as successful as it was in the past. So I think they're happy when they win, but they don't expect to win against every Big 12 team.
No, but I think it just proves their point of the worst Big 12 team, i.e. it was West Virginia, could beat any of the worst teams from the Pac-12.
Oh,
Big
absolutely.
10. It just proves how deep the Big 12 is.
So, on that note, West Virginia travels to Lubbock, taking on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Asa, who you have coming out on top of that game? This
is tough. This is a tough one because when I've gone with Texas Tech this year, I have an above 500 record. So I'm gonna go with the Red Raiders.
Okay.
I think they're gonna get it done. Coach McGuire's been doing great things. We love to sing his praises, Jace and I, and he will continue to help build this Red Raider program and get them to a bowl game.
I really think Texas Tech is on the up and up with McGuire as their coach, and I think they get the victory as well. Big thing is you have West Virginia coming off an emotional win on a Thursday night. An extra long week sometimes is a bad thing. I think the Red Raiders get it done, especially after they get a bye.
I'm going with the Mountaineers. I have them coming to Texas and taking home the win.
What's the spread on that? Do we know that?
It's a great question.
I didn't even look at that. I can check it.
Please pause while we stat check.
Well, Texas Tech is favored to win by ESPN's FPI. 6 points by Texas Tech, and it's over/under of 66.
It's reasonable.
I'm not going to say Texas Tech is going to win by 6, but I think they win.
Yeah.
Okay, looking at the team that played and lost to West Virginia, Baylor, they are hosting the Jayhawks. Jace, I'll let you go first. Who do you have winning this game?
You know, if it was Jalen Daniels, I'd probably say Kansas, but Baylor does a lot.
Sorry to cut you off. Do we have an update on Jalen Daniels?
No, I haven't heard anything since his injury.
I believe it's like a 2 to 3 week if I saw it correctly.
Yeah. I think Kansas makes it close. I don't think they win, especially if Blake Shapen's playing, which I also don't know if he is. I know he got hurt in the West Virginia game. It looked like it was a concussion protocol, which in theory he should be fine. So I'm going to go Baylor. I'm going to say close. Probably a similar game to the OU-Kansas game this past weekend.
Just high scoring back and forth.
Yeah, but Baylor wins.
Baylor has not done anything really this year to impress me. So I'm going to go with the Jayhawks. And Mr. Bean, he's going to get redemption. He's going to.
You just said he's going to be bean dipped last week.
He was, because it was against Oklahoma in Norman. But compared to Baylor,
I will say that Baylor Stadium is nothing to any other Big 12 stadium.
And against like Dylan Gabriel, I think this Baylor team's beat up, and I don't think they have a lot of pride. Kansas, bounce back, get bowl eligible, and we'll see you in the Duke Mayo's Bowl.
I do have an interesting stat on Baylor. So their leading receiver is Gavin Holmes. He has 16 receptions for 390 yards and 3 touchdowns.
That's their leading receiver.
Correct, but you want to know what's funny? 210 of those 390 yards came against West Virginia, and they lost.
Wow.
So, I mean, that just says a lot about how this team has been going.
What about you, Alex? Who do you got?
I am kind of a mix of you both. I have Baylor winning because I think they'll do well after this loss. I don't think they're down and out just yet. And I'm worried that the Jayhawks are sputtering out. I just don't think they lost their fearless leader in Jalen Daniels.
I hate to say it, but I agree. If you think about the last time Kansas was 5-0, do you want to know what happened the rest of the season?
No,
they lost.
I believe they went 6-0 because they
they
were bowl eligible, and then
they immediately lost every game after.
I just want them to make it to a bowl, man.
Thankfully, they're not 5-0. So
yeah, well, it was 6-0. I meant that. Oh, yeah.
Yesterday
Similarity.
we had you.
History does repeat itself, but not this year.
You did poor math. Now you're getting the records wrong.
Hey,
not a good
I'm
numbers
good at
weekend.
sports.
Okay, the last Big 12 game before we preview our own game. Kansas State at TCU, Battle of the Purple Big 12 schools. This is the game that I'm most curious to watch. They are both ranked. TCU did move up to 8, and K-State is at 17 in the rankings. Asa, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
We talked about it on the show on our Poke Report yesterday, so I'm going to talk about it again. Max Duggan and the TCU Horned Frogs are the best team in the Big 12, so I'm going with them against Adrian Martinez. He's been doing a great job, not throwing interceptions, playing well above what he normally does, but he's going to sputter out here.
I despise the Big 12 right now because I have no idea who to pick. I really don't.
Exactly. It's a hard matchup.
It's. I want to pick TCU, and that's who I'm going to go with because I just trust Max Duggan a little more than Adrian Martinez. But to me, there is not a game anymore that I could pick and say, oh, yeah, I'm 100% sure on that.
I agree.
Even like West Virginia, Texas Tech, I could easily pick West Virginia. Kansas, Baylor, I could easily pick Kansas. I mean, heck, unless Alex picks TCU here, all 3 games we have at least one of us has picked the other team.
Alex is not picking TCU.
Okay, so we're all going to go
with
TCU.
K-State.
This will be the one we'll all go with.
No, I'm saying I'm picking K-State.
Oh, you are picking K-State.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, that proves my point right there. Everybody's
Adrian
picking
Martinez and the Wildcats because I don't want to play an angry K-State in Manhattan next week.
Well, hey, wishful thinking can be beneficial.
Texas didn't want to play an angry Oklahoma State, but that's what they're going to get.
Exactly.
All right, that's a good segue, unless you guys have any more Big 12 takeaways? No?
Big 12 is the best conference in terms of depth that I think I've seen in a long time.
Get out your charcuterie board and enjoy some Big 12 football.
Correct. Watch every game. It's so much fun.
After last week's games, OSU did fall to 11 in the ranking, which is still not bad.
No,
they're being pretty generous.
Correct. Texas.
Two overtimes, you don't drop that much.
Texas is 20. I am upset, though, because I think it would have been cool knowing that Tennessee beat Alabama. Oklahoma State, if we won, could have maybe jumped Alabama in the polls. And I think that would have been a cool sight to see.
It's the year of the orange. You got Tennessee winning. You got Oklahoma State winning. You got Texas winning. You even got Illinois winning out here.
And Syracuse.
And Syracuse as well. I mean, there's a lot of orange teams going.
I will admit my family is in town. My dad and sister are here in the podcast booth with us, and my sister is a Syracuse alum.
Guess who Syracuse is playing this week? Another orange team, Clemson.
Oh.
Lots of orange teams.
All right, we mentioned at the top of the show the storyline coming into this game. It is the homecoming game. Last time OSU lost at home, 2020 homecoming to Texas when the seatbacks went flying to the field.
I remember that. I remember.
Texas leads this series 26-10. Does anyone know what the series is in Stillwater?
Can't say I have an exact number.
In Stillwater?
Mm-hmm. There's 12 games played, if that helps.
Okay. I'm going to go Oklahoma State wins and losses, let's say 5-7.
Okay. Jace?
I'll go...
Go 4-8.
Yeah, I'll go 4-8.
9-3.
Oh.
Texas.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
okay.
We've only won against Texas 3 times in our own stadium. Gundy is 8-9 against Texas as well. So historically, it's always a pretty tough
we always
matchup.
play great in Austin. Austin's almost a guaranteed win for the Cowboys, and in the last 10 years.
Which really doesn't make sense. Why can't we win at home?
It's a rivalry game. It's become a rivalry game that doesn't get enough mention. But because in college football, when it turns into a standard conference and then to rivalry, that's when a lot of the logic and the rules, everything gets thrown out, and then it's just who wants it more. And I think every time Texas comes up here to Stillwater, they are so adamant about winning because we and then the rest of the stadium just hates Texas. OSU fans hate Texas almost as much as Oklahoma. I mean, it's a hair's difference.
Listen, there's been a lot of history with Oklahoma State and Texas, not just on the field, off the field. There's a lot. I do think there is a lot more respect for Steve Sarkisian in this program than there was for Tom Herman.
Well, that's all of college football.
Correct. Tom Herman, that started it all when he tried to go fight Gundy after the game was already over. It was an interesting scenario for that. But then the seatbacks, that was just a crazy game in general.
Halloween night.
Correct.
Yeah.
Halloween was alive and well, but I'm telling you, I don't expect anything different.
Looking at Texas from afar, they barely lost to Alabama and Texas Tech. Then they crushed OU. Then they barely beat Iowa State. Their only road game so far has resulted in a loss, and that was to Texas Tech. And I think BPS has more home field advantage to the Cowboys than Lubbock. Correct me if
we
I'm
don't have
wrong.
Tortillas.
I guess that's true. Should we bring some?
Pete's
We have seat
gone.
covers.
We have seat covers.
Come get it.
They were without their quarterback Quinn Ewers for a time, but they really didn't struggle when the backup Hudson Card came in either.
That's true.
Bijan Robinson is their leading rusher, a name that we've seen before, talked about before. There's a big drop-off. He's at nearly 800 rushing yards, and then the next man up doesn't even have 300, and then no one else has over 100. What are your thoughts on this Texas offense and knowing that they will run the ball?
They can cause a lot of problems for us. So kind of what Texas Tech was doing with those passes in the flat or slants across the middle of the field, Texas loves to do that, and they also love to run the wheel route, and they got a guy by the name of Jordan Whittington who Quinn Ewers loves to throw to him, and it's always around the flat. This is arguably the most athletic team we're going to play. These are a lot of 4- or 5-star talents. Mentally, I'm not going to say they're strong, but they are very athletic. This is a very long and athletic and fast team.
Yeah, there's not really a bad spot in that. You mentioned Jordan Whittington. He's not even the leading receiver. It's Xavier Worthy. He was 32 receptions, 432 yards, and 6 touchdowns. 6 touchdowns. Now, Bijan has 10, but there's not a bad guy on this team. You mentioned Hudson Card coming in and playing just as well as Quinn was at the time. I think Quinn is obviously the better quarterback. But when you add him into the mix, when you have Bijan Robinson, which I know Oklahoma State fans, we're going to immediately send this away, but people are saying that he is the closest thing to Barry Sanders we've seen.
Nah.
I immediately throw that away, but
Yeah.
I just know that that's what the national media is saying. That's what
He
I've
is
heard.
talented.
He's very talented.
Very talented.
But the thing is, him and Roshan Johnson, first of all, very cool names to go together. Second of all, they're not just running backs. They're also the 4th and 5th leading receivers on their teams with 12 receptions and 16 receptions with over 100 yards for each of them, 200 for Bijan. They are dynamic, and I said this yesterday, there's not a position where they don't, 1, have depth, or 2, have an obvious guy who is very, very good at his position and could be ranked in the top 5 in really all of their position.
And Alex, there is a silver lining though with this. But if you were going to segment into like how the Cowboys can win, I have something. But
no, you can go.
I was just going to say, if Cowboy fans, if you want something to hold on to against Texas, is their offensive line. Lots of freshmen there. That's going to be their biggest weakness. That's where Brock Martin and the Cowboy defensive line can come in and take advantage.
How is Bijan? Is he just that good that they can have a poor offensive line?
So here's the thing with Bijan. He has vision like nobody else, and that's why people are comparing him to Barry, is because of his vision. There are holes that are literally there for a split second, and he somehow shoots them. The offensive line, it definitely isn't good. But with Bijan, he hasn't played a defensive line like this. They haven't played Baylor yet, who has arguably the second best defensive line behind us. They haven't really played anybody with a good defensive line. I mean, Alabama, yes, I guess. I guess that's good.
Football?
But when you have depth and you have a guy named Brock Martin staring down your throat, it ain't happening.
I'm saying that there is a silver lining there. The question is, can we get to Ewers or Bijan fast enough?
I do want to add, just to put in perspective how run-heavy this Texas team is and how important Bijan Robertson is. He has more yards than Richardson and Spencer Sanders rushing combined. And those are our two leading rushers.
Yeah, our running game is not been prolific at all this year.
Before we get into predictions, I do want to say a defensive guy we need to look out for is Deshaun Jamison. He's a defensive back. He has 2 interceptions and 5 passes deflected on this season. So I think Spencer Sanders, especially if he's going to be more accurate this week, or if he's going to have issues like last week, it could cause some issues.
Texas secondary knows how to force interceptions. If he's not on his game, this is bad.
Yeah. I really don't know what to say. There's a lot of determining factors in this game.
There is.
But we all know what one is going to be the determining factor in terms of if Oklahoma State wins or loses, and it's Spencer Sanders.
Jace, I will let you start off with your predictions. Texas currently, let me give you the stats. Texas currently has a 66% chance to win. The over-under just moved down a half a point. It's now 60.5. It was 61.
That changes everything for me.
And the spread also moved down from 6.5 to 6 in Texas's favor.
Man,
why are you hesitating?
I'm just trying to think. So
he's embarrassed from his score prediction yesterday that the math was wrong for, so he's trying to double check.
So here's what I'll say: the secondary, after having a very bad game last week, is going to need to have a good one this week. I think they will. I don't know how good of a game it'll be, but I think they will. I think Jabbar is going to bounce back. I think Jason Taylor is going to understand, not drop down.
Finger waving from Jabbar.
Yeah, Jabbar loves that finger wave. I really don't know why, but I mean, hey, if he wants to do it, play well, and I think he will. Jason Taylor, I think, learned a lot from that TCU game. He dropped down on Max Duggan too many times, and if you do that with Quinn, it's going to be touchdown after touchdown. I'm going to go Oklahoma State, not by much, a very, very, very small margin. In fact, 1 point, 40-41, or 41-40, Oklahoma State. I would not be surprised if Texas wins. I would not be surprised if Oklahoma State wins. I would not be surprised if Texas wins by 30.
Do you think this will... Okay, well, I guess that kind of changed my question. Asa, do you think it's going to be a close game or a blowout game in either direction?
I think this is going to be a close game.
That's
because
what I'm thinking
both quarterbacks are good, but both quarterbacks are not excellent with their accuracy. And a lot of that was exposed from Quinn Ewers. He made a lot of mistakes throwing to his receivers. I was watching that Iowa State game, and he didn't look extremely sharp.
That's the biggest thing is if Quinn Ewers didn't play this Iowa State game, I would have easily picked Texas. But after watching that, I'm like, okay, they're definitely vulnerable.
There's hope.
There's not hope. It's not like they're the Death Star that we're about to go face. So I think the biggest thing is, I'll say this. If it's a blowout, Texas wins. If it's a close game, Oklahoma State wins.
How much do you think the heat will impact the game? Because I think the high tomorrow is about 90, or high later today is about 90.
Yeah, I think it's pretty hot, but you also have to remember where Texas plays in the heat of Austin. So
it's very humid. They're used to it.
And Oklahoma State, I mean, they didn't have a day game in the heat, but they did play, a couple games during the hot stretch of the year. So I don't think it'll affect it too much. I think the weather change might because
That's
it was
what I'm
so
saying.
cold
You know,
here.
It's been cold lately.
Correct. I would more expect the wind to be a big factor because it is
guess
supposed to
that
be
is
pretty
true.
windy that day. Today.
Asa,
It's crazy.
did you give your score prediction?
Yeah.
I haven't. And Alex,
Are you going to break some people's
why
hearts
I'm
on air?
here is because I believe in having integrity as a podcaster, and I believe that you don't do things off of emotion, but you do things logically, and you stay true to what you believe rather than trying to pander. So I'm not happy to say this, but I have Texas winning. This will probably be the first and only time in this podcast, unless we'll see how Bedlam is. We can talk about that later. But I have Texas winning this one 34-31.
I have OSU winning 34-31.
Whoa. Okay. So,
So-
hey, you're doing the smart move, though, by copying my
Whoa,
my
no,
score
I
prediction.
had it written down.
You're
I
doing
said
a
it on the
smart move.
poker
Y'all are
board.
going to be screwed when it's a 51-52 game. And I'm all right, guys, how far are y'all off?
You finally get to join the club.
Okay, hey. Who picked Texas Tech to beat Texas?
But Asa has been more accurate with the numbers.
We're talking numbers, Mason.
Yeah, we're
It's
talking
all about
numbers.
the numbers.
Yeah, I'm not good with numbers. we
Well,
already
We
figured
know
that out.
You have 3 calculators over there. People can't see back
Yeah,
home.
I've calculated scores wrong twice now this season. I think I'm just going to stop saying, oh, they're going to score over this amount. I'm just going to say my
No
score.
timeouts, right? Or no punts, right?
Yeah. No punts, no punts.
We're going to punt a couple times this game. I'm not
Do
going
you
to
guys
stray away
have
from
any
that.
last minutes before we sign off for the
Hey,
homecoming game?
I'll say this. No matter what happens in this game, go enjoy yourself. It's a homecoming here. It's America's greatest homecoming. There's a lot of fun things besides the game. And if we lose, it's all right. And if we win, just the cherry on top of an amazing homecoming day.
Like I said, make sure that charcuterie spread is ready to go. Have it right in front of you, or have some chicken wings and enjoy a great game of football.
One win today, and we are on the road to Arlington. That's all I'll say.
That's true,
One
that's
win today.
true.
Agreed.
All right, thank you for listening to the OSU preview. I'm Alex Dusky, joined by Asa Lucas and Jace Andrews. Have a safe and happy homecoming weekend, and
Go Pokes!